I came from couple of people, 4 people, 5 people, and then all of a sudden it was 10, it was 11. We got to a point whereby my house used to get so full that people had nowhere to sit. At some point I started hearing small rumors. So I would check on my friends. I was like, oh, you didn't show up today. And they'll be like, oh, nah, I cannot come. And sometimes I would wonder, I was like, what is happening? So after a long journey of walking with the Lord, I decided to, go sit down, and I still ask myself, why am I still struggling with, the emptiness and everything? So I prayed, and I remember that time I didn't think that I had God, or I didn't hear an answer, like an immediate answer. But I went ahead and said, you know what? I thought to myself, which I thought it was my thought, that I'll go start bringing people together to just tell them about the mistakes I've done and lead them to correct their own mistakes. I decided to share my testimonies with young people so that they can live a better life. And at that point, I was like, yeah, I think it's a good way to kind of redeem some of the things I had done or the things I was struggling with. And, I went and prayed to God. I was like, God, give me an apartment, because now I had started developing a relationship with God, and I knew that when I prayed to Him, He would hear me. So I went and prayed, and I remember I got to this apartment, and I met the lady who took me to a tour. I toured a couple of apartments, but I didn't like them. And then there is a time there's this particular one I went to, and when I got there, it's like the space seemed so big for me, because, I was I had a boyfriend, but I was a single person by that time, just looking for a one-bedroom apartment where I could gather a couple of people. We sit in the living room, share something to eat, and, like a hangout like I used to do in the world, because by then I used to do it, for people to come and drink, play funny games, smoke, do that. But this time around, I wanted to, just sit with people who can tell me about God, or where we can share about our struggles and find our way out. And when I went to that apartment, I was like, this is it. But I remember it was bigger than what I was looking for. But I had this boldness in me. I was like, oh my God, this is perfect. It was a room that was on the fourth floor of that building. And I remember going to the office to speak to a lady about acquiring it, and she was like, we can give it to you. You don't need to put any down payment. I'll give you the first month free. And I was like, oh, that was strange when you think about the way you acquire apartments in America. And I was like, maybe this is actually a good thing. And it is, God is in it. And, I got the apartment, and I started the nitty-gritties. I need beautiful chairs. I'm a person who loves very beautiful interior space. And I started, so it started lagging. I acquired the apartment, but I spent a couple of months without doing what I was acquiring it for, because to me, it was like, I'm just starting up something to hang out with my friends. And so I cared about how it looks like, what chairs I have, what kind of decor I have, what kind of, plates I have, everything. I started minding all these small things, which kept on, taking a lot of time. And I remember one day I was driving, and I was at the light after like a couple of months of being in this apartment. I was at the light, and then I heard a voice tell me, go start the thing that you asked me the apartment for. And I'm like, oh, I thought it was my idea. Is this God? And I started saying, but I don't have chairs. And the voice told me, let them sit on the floor. I got this kind of like urgency in me, and I was like, oh my God, the voice seemed so strange because it was heavy. So it was like I needed to do this so urgently. I needed to get people, but I struggled a bit with it because I was like, I thought this was all my idea. Why is now, God acting like it's his idea? Like, why does it seem like now it's God unctioned? Like, why? I asked myself a lot of questions, but deep down inside me, I was like, there is an urgency. I need to do this right here and then I remember I went on my phone, made a flyer. I called a couple of people. I was like, guys, come to my house on this day, which was a Monday. Come to my house, let us talk about God. And I remember that day we only had one chair. I was too nervous to speak. It's not like I'd walked this very huge journey with God that I could sit and preach. No, I was like, this is not for me. So I started calling in people. I was like, guys, come, we have a meal and talk about God. It was that simple. And I invited people, they sat, I'd cooked, a couple of meals. And then, we just talked about God. It was there. We worshiped, we played, we prayed. And then from there, we ate food and people left and went back to their homes, seated on the floor. There were no chairs. It was just a rag. And it was so fun. I remember doing it. And then this lady that was mentoring me in church at the time, she came and told me, Sophie, this apartment has been separated for the work of God. And she was like, oh, you cannot afford to do anything that is not worthy. You cannot afford to mess up in this apartment. This is a brand new thing. And she said all these words. And I was like, I thought it was just a meeting with my friends, hanging out and talking about God. Why are you making it such a big deal? And she was like, no. This place has been separated for the work of God. And at that point, I did not really understand. I did not get it. I did not know what she was talking about. I listened to her like I'd listened to her a couple of things and ignored them. And I was like, yeah, I don't think it's that serious. We kept on doing this. And every single Monday, the number of people who were coming to my altar, to this place, that I hadn't even called an altar by then. It was just come to Sophie's house. It wasn't anything big. So young people kept increasing. I came from couple of people, 4 people, 5 people, and then all of a sudden it was 10, it was 11. We got to a point whereby my house used to get so full that people had nowhere to sit. I remember I acquired some chairs and we started streaming it live, and because people were like, oh, Sophie, I'm not able to make it this Monday, but can you do something? So I would get my phone and record everything, go live on my page on Facebook, and then send it to them. And young people started getting interested in what I was doing. And at that time, I didn't even understand the magnitude of what I was doing because I had no clue. So I would call people who were inspiring me at the time, and I would tell them, come and share a word with us. We are young people. We don't know what to do. Come share this. So the number of people kept on increasing every week. And I was like, this is insane. Like, what am I getting myself into? I started getting worried about, the apartment, and those people were just so many. And I remember the spiritual leaders started, at some point I started hearing small rumors of spiritual leaders. So I would check on my friends. I was like, oh, you didn't show up today? And they would be like, oh, nah, I cannot come. And sometimes I would wonder, I was like, what is happening? And I was like, okay, I ignored that at first. And then that is the period we went into COVID, whereby they shut down the churches. They shut down every, any place of gathering because people were so afraid and sick. And people were in my house every Monday. I did not know what to do. I was so afraid of telling them, hey guys, stop coming. But at the same time, I enjoyed what we were doing because we weren't going on church. Church had become online, and it was a lot going on. It was a lot going on. But I remember every time people came on Monday, we got so encouraged, and the number kept on increasing. People were saying, you know what, the social distance and everything, and people kept on increasing. I had this room that was separate because remember I got this apartment and it was bigger than what I wanted. I wanted a 1-bedroom apartment, but it was 2 bedrooms. So I said I would dedicate this particular room to God. I'll give it to him as his room. Let him be there because, I was single. I mean, I had a boyfriend, but I wasn't living with him anymore. I was alone in this house. So I was like, why not just give this room to the Lord? So I called it my prayer room. And people just kept on coming. We would sit at my apartment for hours and hours, like we would go to midnight because people just felt like there was no other place to run to. And I remember one of my spiritual leaders reaches out to me and tells me, hey, listen, you need to stop. You need to close up. You need to stop opening this place. You are collecting a lot of people. You are putting it on social media. A lot of people are coming to your houses. And I remember telling him, I told him, hey, listen, they have nowhere to go. I cannot tell people to not come to this apartment. I cannot tell people to come. I started getting this pain for these people because I was like, where are we going to go? The churches have closed. People are no longer going to work. They are seated in their homes depressed. And one of the things that really messed me up during that season is that I remember that time I felt it was New Year's. I think COVID started in 2019, so going into 2020, going into 2021. I don't remember clearly, but it was, I think, 2019 going into 2020. And I remember that time battling with me closing the altar. Because it was true, people were dying from COVID. It seemed so reckless that I was still opening up my house and I was struggling with this thing. So I go into my prayer room, I was like, God, I feel like what I'm doing here is a good thing. But a spiritual voice, a spiritual mentor, a person who is so vital in my life is telling me to close the altar. What am I supposed to do? I feel like what I'm giving to people is a beautiful thing. People are being helped. So I remember that day going into my prayer room and coiling up in pain. I was like, God, I'm going to get these people and tell them to go and never come back to this place. I see the fellowship they have. I see the joy and happiness because I've always been a person who likes to gather people, bring them together. Even I was doing it in the world, but this time I had gone to that part of my life whereby I wanted to do everything for God. So I was like, this is also being stripped away from me. I'm not serving in the church. I'm still going to the streets. But I remember this time the pain wasn't about ministry. It was about what I was taking away from these people. I enjoyed their company. I enjoyed seeing people smile and eat together. And I called up in my prayer room and I was like, okay, what do I do? And I remember I heard the voice of God tell me, leave the altar open. And I was like, yeah, I love this altar way too much. I'm starting to hear voices. All churches were closed that time, but there is this particular church that was open on that New Year's. And I just get myself, walk out, run, and drive to this church. And because my heart was so much in pain, I go sit in the corner of the church. I wasn't even praying. I just wanted to be in the presence of God because this thing kept on ringing and ringing in my head. And me staying away from church at that time had felt like, okay, yeah, this is what is going on is good. I'm not fighting with people anymore. I have something going on in my house. I'm going to the street. So I kind of like had this calmness. I wasn't hearing a lot of people like fight me and do that. But I was like, I don't want to go back into that mess again where I'm hated by everybody. So I was struggling with that. So I go sit in this church and I felt so lost. I was like, is this okay? Am I doing the right thing? Am I hearing voices? Am I pretending to hear God? Yet it is just a voice. It's my own desire. Am I doing something wrong? But I knew what I was doing was good. And I remember that time, this church had a visitor, a preacher from out of state. They finish ministering, we go to greet the pastors, and then the pastor of the minister that was ministering, he lost his life, he died, God rest his soul. The lady, I went to greet her and she held my hand and she told me, I don't know who you are, but God has told me to tell you that what you're doing is the right thing. Do not close the altar. You could be there. You hear it deep inside you that the Lord has asked you to do something, but your spiritual leaders, everyone that surrounds you is telling you that is not the right thing, or you did not hear God. You feel like this thing that the Lord is telling you to do is right, but all the odds are working against you. Maybe God told you to start a YouTube channel and speak to people, share something, but you are struggling with it. But deep down inside you know that is God. You need to do it. Because all of a sudden, me who was scared, when this lady told me that God had told you to continue leaving the altar open, I knew that was God. Because this woman was from out of state. She's not of my culture. She's not from our community. She didn't know who I was. She wasn't even the ministering pastor. But God gave her a message for me. So that took away every shadow of doubt that I had that it was God speaking to me. And I know you who's watching me, deep down inside, you know it is God sending you to do what you're supposed to do. But everything is discouraging. The views on that YouTube channel God told you to start is discouraging. The views on TikTok are discouraging. When you go to preach to the streets, it seems like no one is listening to you. But stay in that place, because that is God speaking to you. So I leave that day. I go back home. And the next Monday, I put out the flyer. And I call people to pray. And everyone did not show up. Everyone did not show up. Checked on them. Their spiritual leaders say they shouldn't come. Some gave me excuses that the weather is bad. A bunch of things. And then it was only me, the lady who was moderating, the service, and the guy who was on the camera, who used to go live. So I preached. But then there was a gentleman who walked in. He was new. He walked in, and that day we went into the prayer room and we held hands and prayed. We held hands and prayed. I did not understand why this guy had come, but for me, he was a sign that even though the people that I was used to coming in this place did not come, there was still somebody who needed to tap into the anointing that was at this altar. So it gave me encouragement, because the Bible says we serve a God that leaves the 99 and goes after the one. So that was my one who encouraged me. All of a sudden, I stopped thinking about the ones who didn't come. I was like, I'm happy this gentleman is here. And later on, as the lady was, ministering at the altar, later on, the guy committed to the altar and ended up marrying this girl. They started up a family, a very beautiful family. They're still together. But had I not hearkened to the voice of the Lord that time, the message that the lady brought to me, I wouldn't have continued doing what I was supposed to do. And this is the kind of negativity you could be facing right now in your life. Everything does not make sense. You go to the streets, you don't feel like your voice is being heard. God told you to set up a YouTube channel, but the views are very disappointing. No comments, no one is sharing what you are doing, but somebody is saying it, and keep going. Later, I interacted with this gentleman, and he told me he had fallen so far away from God. And he started his journey after that night, and he started coming back to the Lord. Later on, he told me, when I came to that altar you guys used to pray. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, what are you doing? Like, we looked like clowns. But later on, he became that clown. He was praying, leading prayer, doing this and that. He enjoyed staying. But because that one time, I left the altar open, even though my spiritual leaders were saying you shouldn't. But I had heard the voice of God. I had very spiritual people call me, ask me, Sophia, are you sleeping with this person? And I would say no. And I could see it on their eyes that, mm-mm. But at this point, I knew it was only God that would understand, because he knew what was going on. Let them think what they think, as long as I am right with God.